And from talking about a company that might or might not be focusing on FPV market to a company that is busting their ass every day to give us what we want.
Yes.
HDZero.
HDZero. HDZero has decided, Carl, in fact, has decided to come out and, there's all this hype / dying hype about the Orca goggle. So Carl was like, hey, man, we're making a goggle too. And decided to list some specs that are pretty crazy. Pretty crazy indeed. So just running them down here, 1920 by 1080p, best panel we've seen in any goggle. 2000 nits, which is crazy, which should burn your eyes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 2000 nits on like a laptop screen is more than enough. Like I think 1000 nits is the definition for HDR, the minimum for HDR content. 2000 nits is enough to like view a laptop screen in broad daylight. On a micro display in a goggle, 2000 nits is excessive. I mean, sure, I'll take it, but no one's going to run this at 2000 nits.
Yeah. So the HDMI in, like you always want. He's talking about a 4 millisecond optimized glass-to-glass fixed latency. I do want to talk about that for a second because 4 milliseconds seems insane from a camera, right?
Well, right. My understanding has been that you're always going to have a minimum of 1 frame of latency on average. So for 30 FPS, that's 60 FPS, that's 16 milliseconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then to get 4 milliseconds, you'd have to be running at 240 FPS, which doesn't seem plausible.
If you're doing a rolling shutter, right, and you're sending, how often are you sending data with the rolling shutter? Because you're sending it.
You're sending it constantly, right?
Yeah.
Well,
so then it's just the delay of the sensor through the system.
Yeah.
And they claim 1 millisecond of processing in the HDZero is how long they say it goes through the system because there's no compression. It's just passing it. So basically, he's saying he thinks he can get 4 milliseconds. And my thought on that is I think a lot of the big hiccup for these systems is going into an HDMI port where you don't know the screen you're drawing to, right? Because you're just drawing onto an HDMI chip and those pixels are going into the
buffers and stuff like that.
That's in the goggle. Yeah, because the goggle is handling all those things.
Yeah.
So it seems to me like it makes a lot of sense that you could really fix a lot of that if you knew exactly what your panel you're drawing onto is. So I don't know. That's pretty exciting. And my thought is like kind of maybe Orca is doing that too. And that's why they have a special connector because you can like talk directly to the panel somehow and draw faster to the panel.
If that's, I believe there's probably a reason Orca came up with this special connector. I just wish they would stop being so freaking coy about telling me what the freak it is.
Yeah.
Just tell me what it is. Yeah. Why is it there? Anyway, we're talking about HDZero though. If you told me you were going to do a 4 millisecond glass-to-glass digital system, I would tell you you're lying. You're full of, like the Foxeer Digisight V3 camera. Foxeer advertises it as having 3 milliseconds of latency. And I asked him, I know the answer, but I asked him anyway. And they said, oh no, that's the camera latency. And I was like, yeah, because DJI is 25 to 35 milliseconds. They're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, okay, so you're basically just trying to mislead people in your marketing. Okay, that's an accusation. I should take that back. That's my interpretation of their marketing. But when Carl Zhao says 4 milliseconds of glass to glass, I don't think he's just lying for marketing reasons. And I think he's smart enough to know that he can accomplish that. I'm not sure how, though.
Yeah, that's kind of where the 3 millisecond you're talking about there, plus the 1 millisecond on HDZero was where the 4 I was thinking I was coming from.
Yeah.
If you don't have any wasted time drawing those pixels straight to the camera,
I don't know.
Straight to the screen. But anyway, so also, it's all bothersome. It says, how do you compress a video if it's transmitted line by line? You don't. HDZero does not compress.
Correct.
They do like some weird encoding thing, but there's no compression that happens. It's like it's a different way that it happens. There's only like 2 lines floating. There's no buffer in HDZero. They don't buffer frames or anything. So it's kind of a different way of doing things. So the other specs, a couple people are a little bit upset. We talked about FOV in the Orca discussion. And their FOV currently is listed at 43 for 16 by 9, which is not too bad, but 38 for 4 by 3.
So it's a native 16:9 screen, and then you're going to crop it down.
Yep. And his argument for native 16:9 was just that everything is 16:9. Like every
Right.
sensor we talked about, even the 4x3 HDZero Micro V2 sensor is actually a 16:9 sensor that's cropped. Just it's a really big sensor.
Mhm.
And so it seems like if that's the native sensor, then it makes a lot of sense to have that as your native screen, right?
Yeah, yeah. Except if you were to use a 4:3 display in the goggle, you could simply have a larger display in the goggle. Like it would you would fill more of the physical space in the goggle, therefore you would presumably appear larger in the field of view. So even if your sensor is going to be 16:9 or your camera is going to be 16:9, I might prefer to have a 4:3 display in the goggle and just kind of like zoom it up or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
that probably doesn't work like I think it might. I'm just probably dumb for thinking that. I fly 4:3 though. There's a question in the chat. Hold on a second, Blunty. There's a question.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. There's a question in the chat which said, if both HDZero and DJI made an ASIC, why is DJI so much better? And I think there's two reasons for that. Number one is that they took a different engineering approach. So DJI's approach is to compress the data and transmit the data and retransmit lost data, right? Which means you get variable latency and you get higher latency, but you get higher resolution image. Whereas HDZero's focus is to do a more analog-like broadcast system where you're not compressing the data basically at all, and you're just broadcasting it out, and there's no retransmissions. So one reason is just that they had different engineering constraints, but the other reason is that DJI has an infinite amount of money to spend on this project and then not even notice that they did it. Whereas Carl Zhou presumably does not.
And not only that, but they spent that money like 8 times. Like the P1 chip that's in the DJI system it's not like a new thing. They've iterated on this over and over and over again for years and years and years.
Correct. This is not V1.
For people who don't know, there used to be another box you could buy with a camera in front of it. You could put on a wing or a quad from DJI, and it was called the Lightbridge system.
Yep.
And it was another ASIC silicon-based solution that DJI had years ago. DJI has been doing this for a long time, and they're just going to be better at doing this kind of stuff. This is the first really low latency version they've done, but this is something they've been pushing to for a while. So.
Correct. Yeah. Not all ASICs are created equal.
I just say? Can I just say that should give you a lot of hope for the future of HDZero? Because HDZero, as far as I know, literally on the first chip, the original HDZeros that were pitched to Fat Shark was labeled HDZero, and it had a DM5680 chip, which is the same ASIC that we are using today. So.
That's a really great point, Blunty. For HDZero, I think there's no question that HDZero does not. HDZero is worse than DJI in some respects. I don't want to be mean, but when you think about what Carl has achieved, when you think about the amount of money he spent, which is probably substantial, I don't know the number, I guarantee the amount that Carl has spent on HDZero is 1/10 or more or less what DJI has spent, especially if you consider the fact that this is like Gen 4 of their system.
Yeah, they've got so much like ingrained R&D that you can't even calculate from so many years.
Right. Yeah. So presumably Carl is going to he's got room to grow. He's got places to go. Ooh, that rhymes. Anyway, the goggles coming in May. So, beta testers in May, right, Blunty?
Yeah. His plan is beta testers in May. We know how the supply chain works, so I'm guessing beta testers in September. And then I'll be very happy if we get them before that. But a couple other things I wanted to note. He added a power button by common request. He added ELRS backpack support, so this will be built in, hopefully backpack for ELRS, so you don't even have to wire it up. It'll automatically change channels from ELRS Lua and everything. He'll have the microphone to record the ambient sounds, at least from the goggles, which is a request that was pretty cheap, so he tacked it in
Orca did that. I love it.
He's trying to do a system for everybody. He's like, hey, if you have some thoughts and you really feel like it's a good reason, like tell us and we'll see what we can do, And a part of the reply that he put here that we listed is also, he's seen the concerns about FOV. He's working on FOV. He's going to do testing to find out what the best ones are and how it works out. And I do not believe they'll release a goggle that is not good. From the systems that we've had so far, I think that they'll continue to try to iterate on that and make it a good product for people. The other thing I just want to mention, a lot of people are worried about the price. They are seeing that, like, hey, this is a crazy screen and there's a crazy options here and all these things. And even though they have not made these goggles yet, they have sourced a lot of the parts and looked at prices. And from what I've been told, they are still aiming at the same price as a Skyzone or an Orca or an HDO2.
The good news is that potentially the price will go down the more it's delayed.
Yes. Yes. And also remember, this is integrated HDZero. So and it will have the
and analog, presumably. It'll have an analog receiver, right?
It'll have the module bay just like the other goggles would.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, that's appealing. Do we know if it's like a box goggle or if it's like Fat Shark style goggle? It's got to be a box goggle, right? No, he said 38 degree field of view.
Exactly, because the field of views are variable like that. I would expect that it's actually going to be like a traditional goggle, not a box. But
box goggle would be like 50 to 80.
Yes, but that was not specifically called out. So.
Okay. All righty. Those were the two big items for this week. And we wanted to spend plenty of time digging into them. Thank you guys for digging into them with us. I want to say Andrew Plemons is asking for help in the chat. I can't bear to see it. This is the FPV news, not a Q&A, Andrew, so I'm not going to take your question right this minute. But you and anyone is welcome to email me, joshuabardwell@gmail.com, and I will do my best to help you out. That's the best way to do it. I'm such a boomer. Email. Ugh.